Step into History Page, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings timeless mysteries to life.
In the shadow of Egypt's ancient pyramids, a cursed tomb hides a deadly secret. A man is found dead, crushed beneath a stone. Was it an accident or murder? Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, steps into a web of lies, greed, and betrayal. Who among the ambitious archaeologist, the secretive scholar, the haunted soldier, or the fearful lady is hiding the truth? Why was a golden scarab concealed? And what does it reveal about a killer's motive? Join Poirot's little gray cells in a race against time to unmask a murderer before the desert claims another life. Chapter 1. The Sands of Suspicion. The sun hung low over the Nile, casting a golden sheen across the endless dunes, as if the gods of ancient Egypt had spilled their treasury upon the earth. The air was thick with the scent of dust and the faint, sweet decay of the river's edge. In the shadow of the Great Pyramids, the expedition camp of Sir Reginald Worthington stood in orderly defiance of the wilderness, an enclave of British ambition amid the timeless sands. Tents fluttered gently in the evening breeze, their canvas walls glowing faintly from the lanterns within. The camp, though temporary, bore the hallmarks of its leader's meticulous nature. Every rope taut, every crate aligned, every tool accounted for. Yet beneath this veneer of control, a restless unease stirred, like the shifting of the desert itself. Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's steadfast companion, stood at the edge of the camp, his pith helmet tilted back as he mopped his brow. The heat was oppressive, even as the day waned, and his thoughts wandered to the cool, orderly streets of London. He had accompanied Poirot to Egypt at the detective's insistence, though the precise reason for their journey remained, as ever, tantalizingly vague. Poirot had merely said, with that maddening twinkle in his eye, "Mon ami, the sands of Egypt hold secrets older than time, and where there are secrets, there is work for Hercule Poirot." Hastings turned his gaze to the camp's central tent, where Sir Reginald Worthington, the famed archaeologist, held court. Worthington was a man of imposing presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice that boomed across the desert like a cannon. His latest venture, the excavation of the tomb of Pharaoh Khemtu, had captured the imagination of the British public. Newspapers brimmed with tales of golden artifacts, hidden chambers, and whispers of a curse that guarded the pharaoh's rest. Hastings, ever the romantic, had been thrilled at the prospect of adventure. But now, standing in the stifling heat, he felt a prickle of foreboding. The camp was a microcosm of society. A closed, cool demeanor belied a fierce passion for her work. Her assistant, young Thomas Ridley, was a nervous, bookish sort, forever scribbling notes and adjusting his spectacles. Then there was Major Harold Blake, a retired military man turned amateur historian, whose gruff manner and penchant for whiskey made him an uneasy fit among the academics. Rounding out the group was Lady Beatrice Worthington, Sir Reginald's wife, a fragile beauty whose presence in the camp seemed more ornamental than practical. Her delicate frame and penchant for fainting spells had already caused a stir among the workers. As Hastings surveyed the scene, a figure emerged from the central tent, Sir Reginald himself, his face flushed with the exertion of command. He barked orders at a pair of native workers, who scurried to obey, their expressions unreadable. Hastings noted the tension in the air. Sir Reginald's temper was legendary, and his team bore the brunt of it. Yet, there was something else, a deeper undercurrent, as if the camp were a powder keg awaiting a spark. "Captain Hastings," came a familiar voice, crisp and precise, cutting through the evening's hum. Hastings turned to see Hercule Poirot approaching, his small, neat figure absurdly immaculate, despite the dust and heat. His mustache was perfectly waxed, his linen suit pristine, and his patent leather shoes gleamed as if polished by the sun itself. Poirot's green eyes sparkled with that peculiar intensity that Hastings had come to recognize as a sign of intellectual ferment. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings exclaimed, relieved to see his friend. "I was beginning to think you'd been swallowed by the desert. What brings you out here at this hour?" Poirot raised a finger, his expression one of mild reproach. "Mon ami, Hercule Poirot does not wander aimlessly. I have been observing, listening, and most importantly, thinking. The little gray cells, they are never idle, even in the heat of Egypt." Hastings chuckled, accustomed to Poirot's theatrics. "Observing what exactly? The sand? The camels? Or perhaps Sir Reginald's latest tantrum?" Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "All of these, Hastings, and more. The camp, it is a stage, and its players are most intriguing. There is much beneath the surface here, motives, secrets, desires, and where there are such things, there is danger." "Danger?" Hastings frowned, glancing back at the camp. "It's a bit tense, I'll grant you, but surely it's just the pressure of the dig. Sir Reginald's been promising a grand discovery for months, and the investors are getting impatient." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice low. "And when pressure builds—"
Make of this camp.
Hastings hesitated, his soldier's instincts warring with his natural optimism. "Well, it's a mixed bunch, isn't it? Sir Reginald runs a tight ship, but he's not exactly loved. Dr. Carter seems competent, but she's awfully guarded. Ridley's a nervous wreck, and Major Blake, well, he's more interested in his flask than the tomb. As for Lady Beatrice, I can't quite figure her out. She seems out of place." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Very good, Hastings. You see, but you do not observe. The details, they are everything. The way Dr. Carter clutches her notebook as if it were a shield. The glances Ridley casts toward Lady Beatrice when he thinks no one watches. The way Major Blake's hand trembles, not from drink, but from something deeper. And Sir Reginald himself, his confidence, it is a mask, no? He fears something, or someone." Hastings stared at Poirot, his unease growing. "You think there's trouble brewing?" "I think, mon ami, that trouble is already here," Poirot replied. "But come, let us join the others. Sir Reginald has invited us to dine, and there is much to learn from the breaking of bread." The dining tent was a study in contrasts, a long table draped in crisp white linen, set with silver cutlery and crystal glasses, yet surrounded by the raw canvas walls and the distant howl of a desert wind. Sir Reginald presided at the head, his voice dominating the conversation as he regaled the group with tales of the tomb's discovery. Dr. Carter listened politely, her expression unreadable, while Ridley fidgeted with his napkin. Major Blake, already flushed from his pre-dinner whiskey, muttered occasional remarks about damned hieroglyphs. Lady Beatrice, seated at her husband's side, picked at her food, her eyes darting nervously around the table. Poirot, ever the observer, sat quietly, his small hands folded neatly before him. Hastings watched as his friend's gaze flitted from face to face, cataloging every gesture, every word. The meal was a delicate dance of civility, but beneath it lay a current of tension, unspoken grudges, guarded glances, and the weight of secrets yet to be uncovered. As the dessert plates were cleared, Sir Reginald rose, his face grave. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "tomorrow we enter the inner chamber of Pharaoh Khemtu's tomb. It is a moment of triumph, but also of peril. The curse, they say, guards the pharaoh's rest. I do not believe in such nonsense, but I urge caution. We are on the brink of history." A murmur rippled through the group. "Well," Poirot inclined his head, but his expression told Hastings he was far from reassured. As the group dispersed into the night, Hastings caught a glimpse of Lady Beatrice lingering by the tent flap, her face pale, her hands twisting together. Dr. Carter passed her without a word, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. Ridley followed, his eyes fixed on the ground, while Major Blake stumbled toward his tent, muttering under his breath. "Poirot," Hastings whispered as they walked back to their own tent. "What do you make of it all? There's something off, isn't there?" Poirot paused, his gaze fixed on the starry sky. "Off, mon ami. Oui, very much so. The sands of Egypt are silent, but they whisper to Hercule Poirot. And what they whisper is this: before this expedition is done, there will be death." Hastings shivered, despite the warmth of the night. The camp, so orderly and precise, seemed suddenly a stage for something far darker, a mystery that only Poirot's little gray cells could unravel. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Pharaoh. The dawn broke over the Nile with a deceptive calm, painting the desert in hues of rose and gold. The expedition camp stirred to life, the air filled with the clatter of tools and the low murmur of the native workers preparing for the day's labor. The great moment had arrived. The inner chamber of Pharaoh Khemtu's tomb was to be opened, and the promise of untold treasures hung heavy in the air. Yet, beneath the excitement, a pall of unease lingered, as if the very sands held their breath, awaiting some unseen calamity. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the entrance to the tomb, a yawning black maw carved into the rocky hillside. The structure was ancient, its weathered stones etched with hieroglyphs that spoke of gods and curses. Hastings, though no scholar, felt a chill at the sight, his imagination stirred by tales of vengeful pharaohs. He glanced at Hercule Poirot, who stood a few paces away, his small figure immaculate as ever in a cream-colored suit, his mustache gleaming in the morning light. Poirot's eyes, however, were not on the tomb but on the people gathered around it, his gaze sharp and unrelenting. Sir Reginald Worthington was in his element, barking orders with the authority of a general. His broad frame seemed to fill the space, his voice echoing off the rocks as he directed the workers to secure the ropes and clear the debris. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood nearby, her notebook open, her pencil moving swiftly as she recorded every detail of the scene. Her face was composed, but Hastings noted the tightness in her jaw, as if she were bracing herself for something more than the opening of a tomb. Thomas Ridley, her assistant, hovered at her elbow, his spectacles ever stood apart, her parasol shielding her from the sun, her expression one of quiet dread. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly, stepping closer to Hastings. "Observe the faces. They are not all eager for this moment, no? There is fear here, and not of curses or ghosts." Hastings frowned, following Poirot's gaze. "Fear? Well, I suppose it's natural. Opening a tomb after thousands of years, it's bound to make anyone a bit jumpy." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Jumpy, perhaps, but there is more. The fear I see is not of the unknown, but of the known. Someone here knows something, They do not wish to share. Before Hastings could press further, a shout went up from the workers. The final stone blocking the inner chamber had been removed, revealing a dark, narrow passage descending into the earth. Sir Reginald strode forward, his face alight with triumph. "At last," he bellowed, "the tomb of Chem2 awaits us. Dr. Carter, Ridley, prepare the equipment. Major Blake, ensure the workers stay in line. Beatrice, my dear, you may wish to remain here. This is no place for delicate nerves." Lady Beatrice's lips parted as if to protest, but she closed them again, her hands tightening on her parasol. Dr. Carter nodded curtly, already moving toward the passage, while Ridley scrambled to gather their tools. Major Blake muttered something unintelligible, but followed orders, his heavy steps kicking up clouds of dust. Poirot, uninvited but undeterred, stepped forward, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "Sir Reginald," he said, his voice carrying a quiet command, "might I accompany you into the tomb? Hercule Poirot has a great interest in history, and I would be most honored to witness this moment." Sir Reginald hesitated, his eyes narrowing, but then he shrugged. "As you wish, Monsieur Poirot, but stay out of the way. This is a scientific endeavor, not a tourist outing." Poirot inclined his head unruffled. "Naturellement. I am but an observer." The group descended into the tomb, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the ancient walls. The air grew cooler, heavier as they moved deeper, the scent of dust and stone mingling with something older, more primal. Hastings, close behind Poirot, felt his heart quicken. The passage was narrow, its walls adorned with intricate carvings of gods and pharaohs, their eyes seeming to follow the intruders. Dr. Carter murmured translations under her breath, her voice steady but tinged with awe. Ridley, clutching a lantern, stumbled slightly, his breathing uneven. At last they reached the inner chamber, a vast, echoing space dominated by a massive stone sarcophagus. Golden artifacts gleamed in a carved panel, her fingers tracing the hieroglyphs. "This tells of Chem2's reign," she said, her voice low. "A warrior king, feared and revered. But there's a warning here, a curse upon those who disturb his rest." Major Blake snorted, his voice rough. "Superstitious nonsense. It's just stone and gold, nothing more." "Perhaps," Poirot said quietly, his eyes scanning the chamber. "But the human heart, it is not so simple, no. Greed, fear, ambition. These are curses far more potent than any ancient spell." Sir Reginald ignored him, already directing the workers to catalog the artifacts. The group worked in tense silence, the only sounds the scratch of pencils and the shuffle of feet. Hastings watched Poirot, who moved slowly around the chamber, his eyes lingering on every detail. The position of a vase, the angle of a statue, the faint scuff marks on the floor. It was then that the scream shattered the silence, a piercing, desperate cry that echoed through the tomb. The group froze, lanterns swinging wildly as they turned toward the sound. It came from the passage they had just traversed. Sir Reginald cursed, shoving past Ridley to lead the way back. Poirot, with surprising agility, was close behind, his expression grim. They emerged into the blinding sunlight to find chaos. The workers were gathered in a tight knot, their voices a cacophony of fear. At the center of the group lay a body, sprawled face down in the sand. It was one of the native workers, a man named Amr, his head stained with blood, a heavy stone beside him. His eyes stared blankly at the sky, lifeless. Lady Beatrice, who had remained outside, stood frozen, her parasol dropped in the sand. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's dead." Sir Reginald knelt beside the body, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "What the devil happened here?" he demanded, glaring at the workers. One of them, a wiry man named Hassan, stepped forward, his hands raised in supplication. "It was an accident, Effendi," he said, his voice shaking. "The stone, it fell from the pile. Amr, he was beneath it." Dr. Carter, pale but composed, examined the body. "He's been struck on the head," she said. "The wound is severe. He must have died instantly." Major Blake swore under his breath, his hand reaching for his flask. Ridley, trembling, clutched his notebook as if it could shield him from the horror. Poirot, however, stepped closer. His eyes narrowing, was thin, almost imperceptible. "Perhaps, Sir Reginald, but Hercule Poirot does not believe in accidents where human motives are concerned. This man, Amr, he is dead, and the question is not only how, but why." The group fell silent, their faces a mixture of shock, fear, and suspicion. Hastings felt a chill, despite the desert heat. The tomb, with its ancient warnings, seemed to loom larger now, its shadows stretching over the camp. Poirot's words hung in the air, a quiet promise that the truth, however buried, would be unearthed. As the workers carried Amr's body away, Poirot turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Mon ami," he said, "the game, it has begun. And in this game, the stakes are life and death." Chapter 3. The Detective's Arrival. The sun climbed higher, its relentless heat bearing down on the expedition camp. But the air was heavy with more than just the desert's weight. The death of Amr, the native worker, had cast a pall over the group, transforming the excitement of the tomb's opening into a grim tableau of suspicion. The workers whispered among themselves, their eyes darting toward the shadowed entrance of Pharaoh Khemtu's tomb, as if the curse inscribed on its walls had already begun its work. Yet, for Hercule Poirot, standing at the edge of the camp with his hands clasped neatly behind his back, the true curse was not one of ancient gods, but of human nature, greed, fear, and secrets buried deeper than any sarcophagus. Captain Arthur Hastings watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and unease. Poirot's demeanor was as composed as ever, his linen suit untouched by the dust that clung to everyone else, his mustache a perfect curve of waxed precision. But Hastings knew that look in Poirot's green eyes, the glint of a mind already at work, piecing together fragments of a puzzle no one else could yet see. The death of Amr had been declared an accident by Sir Reginald Worthington, but Poirot's quiet insistence that it was no such thing had set the camp on edge. The central tent, where the expedition team had gathered, was a stifling cocoon of tension. Sir Reginald stood at the head of the table, his face flushed with irritation as he addressed the group. "This is a setback, nothing more," he declared, his voice booming. "Amr's death was a tragic accident, and I'll not have superstitious nonsense derailing this expedition. The tomb is open, the artifacts are secure, and we will proceed as planned." Dr. Evelyn Carter, seated with her notebook open before her, raised an eyebrow. "Them working now, Worthington." Lady Beatrice Worthington, pale and fragile, sat apart from the others, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes, wide and haunted, kept drifting toward the tent flap, as if she expected the desert itself to deliver some new horror. Hastings, seated beside Poirot, noted her unease and wondered what could so unsettle a woman who seemed accustomed to luxury and ease. Poirot stepped forward, his small frame commanding attention despite its lack of stature. "Sir Reginald," he said, his voice smooth and precise, "permit me to offer my services. The death of this man, Amr, it is most unfortunate, and the workers, they are indeed unsettled. But Hercule Poirot has some experience in matters of ambiguity. If you will allow me to investigate, I may put these fears to rest and ensure the truth is known." Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching with irritation. "Investigate? Monsieur Poirot, I invited you here as a guest, not a detective. This is an archaeological expedition, not one of your parlor mysteries." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "Précisément, Sir Reginald. And yet, a man is dead, and the harmony of your expedition is disrupted. Is it not better to resolve this matter swiftly, before it casts a shadow over your great discovery?" Dr. Carter spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "I agree with Monsieur Poirot. The workers are talking of curses, and if we don't address this, we risk losing their labor. Let him ask his questions. What harm can it do?" Sir Reginald hesitated, his jaw tightening, but the weight of the group's gaze forced his hand. "Very well," he said grudgingly. "But be quick about it, Poirot. We've no time for theatrics." Poirot inclined his head, his expression serene. "Merci, Sir Reginald. I assure you, Hercule Poirot is always efficient." The investigation began at once, with Poirot moving through the camp with the precision of a conductor orchestrating a symphony. Hastings followed, notebook in hand, ready to record his friend's observations. Their first stop was the site of Amr's death, a patch of sand near the tomb's entrance where the blood had already been swallowed by the desert. The pile of stones, from which the fatal one had supposedly fallen, stood nearby, its arrangement Amr was struck deliberately, and the stone was placed to suggest otherwise. But why? That is the question we must answer. Their next task was to speak with the workers. Poirot, with his uncanny ability to put others at ease, approached Hassan, the wiry man who had spoken earlier. Through a translator, Poirot questioned him gently but persistently. Hassan's story remained consistent. Amr had been working near the stone pile when it collapsed, crushing him. But Poirot's questions were relentless, probing for details, where Hassan had stood, what he had seen, the exact time of the incident.
"Tell me, my friend,"
Poirot said, his voice soothing.
"did you see anyone near Amr before the stone fell? Anyone at all?"
Hassan hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the camp.
"No one, Effendi,"
he said at last, but his hands twisted nervously. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but Hastings knew better. His friend had seen the lie, subtle though it was.
1. The interviews continued with the expedition team, each conducted in the privacy of Sir Reginald's tent. Dr. Carter was first, her demeanor cool and professional. She confirmed her alibi. She had been in the tomb, cataloging artifacts at the time of Amer's death?
I heard the scream,
She said. But I was deep in the chamber. By the time I emerged, it was over.
Poirot, his questions were deceptively simple. Where had she stood? What had she touched? What had she heard? Dr. Carter answered with precision, but Hastings noticed a faint tremor in her hand as she clutched her notebook.
You are meticulous, Dr. Carter.
Poirot said, his tone admiring.
Your notes, they are most detailed, no? May I see them?
Her lips tightened, but she handed over the notebook. Poirot flipped through it, his eyes lingering on a page of hieroglyphs.
Most interesting.
He murmured, returning it.
You are a woman of great discipline.
Thomas Ridley was next, his nervousness palpable. He stammered through his account, claiming he had been with Dr. Carter in the tomb. But Poirot's questions about the exact timing of their work drew hesitant responses, and Ridley's eyes darted toward the tent flap, as if seeking escape.
Hands to these, Major Blake. People who avoidly in the deesworst to these. Major Blake was gruff, his answers curt.
He had been overseeing the workers outside the tomb, he said, and had seen nothing unusual.
Bloody bad luck, that's all.
He muttered, sipping from his flask. Poirot noted the tremor in his hand, the same one he had observed the previous night.
Meeting.
Lady Beatrice was the last, her voice sun now at its zenith. Well, Poirot, Hastings said, wiping his brow. What do you make of it? They all have alibis, more or less. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Alibis, mon ami, are like the sands, shifting, unreliable. Each one tells me something, but not what they think. The truth, it is hidden in the contradictions, the hesitations, the glances they cannot conceal. Amer's death was no accident, and the one who struck him is among us. Hastings shivered despite the heat. The camp, with its orderly tents and bustling workers, seemed a stage for a deadly drama, and Poirot, as always, was its master director. What now? He asked. Now, mon ami, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. We watch, we listen, and we wait. The murderer, they will betray themselves. They always do. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the expedition camp, its heat a tangible weight that seemed to press upon the hearts of those within. The death of Amer had transformed the air of anticipation into one of suspicion, and the camp, once a beacon of scientific ambition, now felt like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap. Hercule Poirot, however, moved through this tension with the calm precision of a surgeon, his mind slicing through the layers of deceit that cloaked the truth. To him, the camp was a chessboard, and each person a piece with motives yet to be fully understood. Captain Arthur Hastings followed Poirot as they made their way through the camp, the detective's small, neat figure a stark contrast to the disarray around them. The workers, though back at their tasks, moved with a wariness that spoke of fear, their eyes darting toward the tomb's entrance as if expecting the pharaoh's wrath to emerge. Sir Reginald Worthington had doubled the guards around the excavation site, his booming voice cutting through the morning as he demanded order. Yet even his authority could not dispel the unease that lingered like dust in the air. Poirot had spent the morning in quiet observation, his green eyes missing nothing. He had insisted on revisiting the site of Amer's death, examining the sand, the stones, and the surrounding area with a meticulousness that left Hastings both impressed and exasperated. Poirot, Hastings said, wiping his brow. You've been over that patch of ground a dozen times. What more can you possibly find? Poirot straightened, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. Mon ami, it is not what I find, but what I confirm. The sand, it tells a story, and the story does not align with the words of our witnesses. The stone that killed Amer was no accident. It was placed with purpose. And now, we must ask, who had the purpose and why? Individually, this time in the relative privacy of a smaller tent used for storage. The tent was cramped, its canvas walls heavy with the scent of rope and leather, but it offered a respite from the prying eyes of the camp. Dr. Evelyn Carter was the first to be summoned. She entered with her usual composure, her dark hair pulled back tightly, her notebook clutched like a talisman. Poirot greeted her with a courteous nod, gesturing to a folding chair. "Dr. Carter," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "You are a woman of great intellect. Your knowledge of Egypt, it is formidable. Tell me, what is it you fear in this expedition?" Dr. Carter's eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. "Fear, Monsieur Poirot. I fear nothing but the loss of knowledge. This tomb is a treasure trove of history, and I am here to preserve it." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "And yet, your hands, they tremble when you hold your notebook. Is it the weight of history? Or something closer, more personal?" Her lips tightened, and for a moment, Hastings thought she might refuse to answer. But then she sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Very well. I'll admit the atmosphere here is strained. Sir Reginald is a brilliant man, but his temper puts everyone on edge, and Amer's death, accident or not, has made things worse. The workers talk of curses, and I can't entirely dismiss their fears." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "And your notebook, Dr. Carter, it contains more than hieroglyphs, does it not? Perhaps a record of tensions, of secrets observed." Dr. Carter's gaze hardened. "My notes are my own, Monsieur Poirot. They concern the tomb, nothing more." "Of course," Poirot said, his tone placating but his eyes sharp. "But tell me, where were you precisely at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, when Amer met his end?" "I was in the tomb, as I told you," she replied, her voice clipped. "Cataloging a set of canopic jars with Ridley. We were deep in the chamber, and the scream brought us out." Poirot made a small note in his own pocketbook. "And the jars, they were in perfect order, no? No disturbances, no signs of haste?" Dr. Carter hesitated, her fingers tightening on her notebook. "Everything was as it should be," she said at last, but Hastings caught the faintest quiver in her voice. Thomas Ridley was next, his nervousness even more pronounced than before. He entered the tent wiping his spectacles, his thin frame hunched as if expecting a blow. Poirot's questions were gentle but relentless, circling back to the timing of his movements in the tomb. "Mr. Ridley," Poirot said, "you are together, you see, measuring the artifacts." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft but probing, "your shoes, they bear traces of sand from outside the tomb, not the dust of the inner chamber. How do you explain this?" Ridley flushed, his stammer worsening. I must have stepped outside earlier. To fetch a tool, perhaps. I don't recall exactly." Poirot's smile was almost pitying. "The memory, it is a curious thing, no? It hides what we do not wish to see." Major Harold Blake was less forthcoming, his gruff demeanor a shield against Poirot's questions. He sat heavily, his flask in hand, and answered in monosyllables. Yes, he had been outside the tomb. No, he hadn't seen Amer before the scream. Yes, he had been near the stone pile, but only to check on the workers. Poirot's questions about his drinking drew a scowl, but Blake admitted to a nip or two during the day. "Keeps the nerves steady," he muttered. Poirot noted the tremor in his hand, the same one he had observed before, and asked about his military service, probing for hidden resentments. Blake's answers were vague, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. Lady Beatrice was the most reluctant, her delicate frame trembling as she entered the tent. Her answers were halting, her voice barely audible. She had been in her tent, she said, resting from the heat. She had heard the scream and run out, only to find Amer dead. Poirot's questions about her husband's temper, about her role in the expedition, drew tears, but little clarity. "I only want this to be over," she whispered. "This place, it's cursed." Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "Madame, a curse is but a story we tell ourselves to explain what we fear. Tell me, what do you fear?" Lady Beatrice shook her head, her hands twisting together. "I don't know," she said, her voice breaking. "I just want to go home." As the interviews concluded, Poirot and Hastings stepped outside, the desert air thick with heat and tension. "Well, Poirot," Hastings said, "they're all sticking to their stories, more or less. But you don't believe them, do you?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Believe, mon ami. I believe in the truth, and the truth is not what they say. Each one hides something. Dr. Carter her secrets, Ridley his movements, Blake his past, Lady Beatrice her fears. And Sir Reginald, his authority is a mask for something deeper. We must peel back these layers, Hastings, and find the motive that binds them to Amer's death." Hastings glanced toward the tomb, its dark entrance looming like a silent accusation. "And the curse? Do you think it's nonsense?" Poirot smiled near the tomb. Poirot's pace quickened, his expression one of grim determination. The game, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The shout that had pierced the camp's uneasy calm sent a ripple of alarm through the expedition team, drawing them toward the tomb's entrance like moths to a flame. The sun, now past its zenith, cast long shadows across the sand, and the air was thick with the scent of dust and fear. Captain Arthur Hastings hurried after Hercule Poirot, whose small, precise steps belied the urgency in his eyes. The detective's mind, Hastings knew, was already sifting through the fragments of the puzzle, seeking the pattern that would reveal the truth behind Amer's death. The disturbance originated near the pile of stones where Amer had been found, now cordoned off by Sir Reginald's orders. A group of workers stood in a tight knot, their voices a low, anxious hum. At the center was Hassan, the wiry worker who had spoken to Poirot the previous day, his face pale and his hands gesturing wildly. Sir Reginald towered over him, his face red with fury, demanding an explanation. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood nearby, her notebook open but forgotten, her eyes narrowed. Thomas Ridley hovered at her side, his spectacles fogged with sweat, while Major Harold Blake leaned against a crate, his flask nowhere in sight, but his expression grim. Lady Beatrice, as ever, stood apart, her parasol trembling in her hands. "What is the meaning of this?" Sir Reginald bellowed, his voice echoing off the rocks. "Speak, man, or I'll have you sent back to Cairo." Hassan, trembling, pointed to the sand near the stone pile. "Effendi, it was not my fault. I was moving the stones as you ordered, and I found this." He gestured to a small, glinting object half buried in the sand. A gold amulet, intricately carved with the image of Anubis, the jackal-headed god. The workers murmured, their eyes wide with fear, and one whispered the word curse in a tone that sent a chill through Hastings. Poirot stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos. "May I see this amulet, Sir Reginald?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. Sir Reginald, still fuming, nodded curtly, and Poirot knelt to examine the object without touching it. His eyes traced its edges, the faint scratches on its surface, and the sand that clung to it. "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. "This amulet, it is from the tomb, no? Yet it is found here outside where Amr died. How curious." Dr. Carter stepped closer, her expression skeptical. "It's likely one of the artifacts was dropped during the initial excavation." "By workers, perhaps? Or do you still insist Amr's death was no accident?"
Poirot straightened, brushing his hands together.
"I suggest nothing, Sir Reginald. I observe. And what I observe is that this amulet, it is a red herring, a distraction meant to mislead. But from what? And by whom?"
The group fell silent, their faces a mixture of confusion and unease. Hastings, watching closely, noted the way Hassan's eyes darted toward the tomb, the way Dr. Carter's fingers tightened on her notebook, the way Ridley's shoulders hunched as if under an invisible weight. Major Blake's scowl deepened, and Lady Beatrice's lips trembled, her gaze fixed on the amulet as if it were a venomous snake. Sir Reginald, impatient, waved a hand.
"Enough of this nonsense. Hassan, you're dismissed. The rest of you, back to work. We've a tomb to catalogue, and I'll not have this expedition derailed by trinkets and superstition."
But Poirot was not so easily dismissed. He turned to Hassan, his voice gentle but probing.
"One moment, my friend. You found this amulet, oui? Tell me, when did you last see Amr alive, and where?"
Hassan hesitated, his eyes flickering towards Sir Reginald.
"It was just before the stone fell, Effendi. He was working near the pile, moving stones. I was with the others, a few yards away." "And you saw no one else?"
Poirot pressed.
"No one near the pile, no one acting strangely?"
Hassan shook his head, but his hands twisted together, betraying his unease. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but Hastings knew his friend had seen the lie, subtle though it was. The detective's gaze swept over the group, cataloging every reaction, every glance. As the workers dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low.
"Mon ami, the amulet, it is a clever ruse. Someone wishes us to believe Amr's death is tied to theft, to the curse, to anything but the truth. But the truth, it is closer than they think."
Hastings frowned, glancing at the amulet now in Sir Reginald's possession.
"You think it was planted? But why? To make us think Amr was stealing?"
"Précisément,"
Poirot said, his eyes gleaming.
"It is a distraction, a red herring to lead us away from the real motive. But it tells us something important. The murderer is among us, and they are clever. They know how to manipulate the scene, how to play on fear."
The rest of the day was spent in further investigation, with Poirot moving through the camp like a shadow, his questions deceptively simple but designed to unsettle. He spoke again with Dr. Carter, asking about the inventory of artifacts and whether any had gone missing before. Her answers were precise, but Hastings noted a flicker of irritation in her eyes when Poirot pressed her on her whereabouts during the hour before Amr's
Said, his voice high. I respect her work, that's all." "And yet," Poirot said, his tone mild, "your eyes, they follow her with more than respect, no? Perhaps there is something you wish to tell Hercule Poirot?" Ridley's face reddened, and he muttered something incoherent before hurrying away. Major Blake, when questioned about his movements, was evasive, claiming he had been checking on the men, but unable to provide specifics. Poirot noted the way his hand shook, not from drink, but from something deeper, perhaps fear or guilt. Lady Beatrice, questioned gently in her tent, was near tears, her frail frame trembling as she spoke of the camp's oppressive atmosphere. "I never wanted to come here," she confessed. "Reginald insisted. He said it would be good for my health, but
It's this place. It's wrong.
Poirot's questions about her husband drew vague responses, but her fear was palpable, and Hastings wondered if it was the tomb she feared, or Sir Reginald himself. By evening, the camp had settled into an uneasy routine, the workers resuming their tasks under Sir Reginald's watchful eye. But the discovery of the amulet had shifted the narrative, and whispers of theft and curses spread like wildfire. Poirot, undeterred, gathered his notes and sat with Hastings in their tent, the lantern casting flickering shadows on the canvas walls. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "This amulet business, it's got everyone rattled. Do you think it's really a red herring? Or could it be the key to the whole thing?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic.
The amulet, mon ami, is both a clue and a deception. It tells us the murderer is cunning, but also desperate. They wish to divert suspicion, to point us toward theft or superstition. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily misled. The truth lies in the human heart, in the motives that drive each of these players. Greed, fear, love, hatred. One of these is the key, and we shall find it.
Hastings leaned back, his mind racing. The camp, with its closed circle of suspects, felt like a pressure cooker, and Poirot's calm certainty was both reassuring and unsettling. As the desert night closed in, the tomb loomed in the distance, its secrets as impenetrable as ever. But Poirot's little gray cells were at work, and Hastings knew that no secret could remain buried for long. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The desert night had settled over the expedition camp like a heavy shroud, the stars above sharp and unyielding against the velvet sky. The air was cooler now, but the tension within the camp burned hotter than the midday sun. The discovery of the Anubis amulet had deepened the unease, fueling whispers of theft and curses among the workers, while the expedition team grappled with a watchmaker. To him, every gesture, every word, every inconsistency was a thread in the tapestry of truth, and he was determined to unravel it. Captain Arthur Hastings sat in their shared tent, the lantern casting a warm glow over Poirot's small, neat figure as he pored over his notes. The detective's pocketbook was open, filled with cryptic jottings in his precise handwriting, and his green eyes gleamed with the intensity of a man on the cusp of discovery. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, watched with a mixture of admiration and impatience. "Poirot," he said, leaning forward, "you've been at this for hours. Surely you've found something solid by now. That amulet, it's got to mean something, hasn't it?" Poirot raised a finger, his expression one of mild reproach. "Patience, mon ami. The amulet, it is a distraction, a red herring, as I have said. But within the distractions, there are clues, small, subtle, but oh so revealing. Hercule Poirot does not chase shadows. He seeks the light of truth, and today I have found a glimmer." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "A glimmer? Care to share, old chap?" Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "In due time, Hastings. First, we must return to the scene of the crime, for there is a detail, a most curious detail, that demands our attention." The two made their way through the darkened camp, the silence broken only by the distant howl of a jackal and the soft crunch of sand underfoot. The tomb's entrance loomed ahead, its dark maw guarded by a single worker who nodded nervously as Poirot approached. The pile of stones where Amr had died was still cordoned off, the sand around it smoothed by the wind, but marked by the faint impressions of the day's chaos. Poirot knelt, his lantern casting a pool of light, and pointed to a small, almost imperceptible mark in the sand, a narrow, curved indentation, barely visible. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low but urgent. "This mark, It is not from a stone, nor from a foot. It is too precise, too deliberate. It is the mark of a tool, a chisel perhaps, or a pry bar, and it is fresh, made at the time of Amer's death. Hastings squinted, barely able to make out the mark in the dim light. A chisel? But why would someone use a chisel here? To loosen the stone that killed Amer? No, no, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The stone was the weapon, but this mark suggests something else. Something was removed, or perhaps hidden, in the moment of chaos. We must consider what was near this spot, what could have been tampered with. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. The amulet was found here. The tomb, for I suspect something is missing. Their investigation led them back to the central tent, where Dr. Evelyn Carter had been cataloging the artifacts from the tomb. The tent was a maze of crates and tables, each covered with carefully labeled items, golden scarabs, alabaster vases, and intricately carved statuettes. Dr. Carter was there, her notebook open, her face pale but composed as she checked her lists. Poirot approached with his usual courtesy, but his questions were sharp. "Dr. Carter," he began, "your inventory, it is most thorough. Every item from the tomb is accounted for." Dr. Carter nodded, her eyes meeting his without hesitation. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. Every artifact is logged, measured, and photographed. Nothing has been overlooked." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft but probing, "I wonder if something has been misplaced. A small item, perhaps, easily overlooked in the chaos of yesterday's tragedy." Dr. Carter's fingers tightened on her pencil, but her voice remained steady. "I assure you, everything is in order. The amulet found by Hassan is the only anomaly, and we've added it to the list." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Very well, but permit me to examine your inventory, if you please. The little gray cells, they are curious." Reluctantly, Dr. Carter handed over her notebook, and Poirot flipped through it, his eyes scanning the meticulous entries. Hastings watched, noting the way Poirot paused at a particular page, his finger tracing a line. "Most interesting," he murmured. "A small golden scarab, listed as found in the inner chamber, but its description, it is vague, no? No weight, no dimensions, only a note that it was set aside for further study." Dr. Carter's jaw tightened. "It's a minor item, Monsieur Poirot. We haven't had time to fully catalog everything." "Naturellement," Poirot said, closing the notebook. "But the minor items, they are often the most revealing." Their next stop was to speak with Thomas Ridley, who was found in the artifact storage tent, nervously sorting through a crate of pottery fragments. His hands shook as Poirot approached, and his spectacles slipped down his nose. "Mr. Ridley," Poirot said, his tone gentle, "you are most diligent in your work with Dr. Carter. Tell me, this golden scarab, do you recall it? Where was it found, and when?" Ridley stammered, his eyes darting to the tent flap. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I saw it, but it was just one of many items. Dr. Carter handled it, I think." "And where were you," Poirot pressed, "when this scarab was set aside? Were you in the tomb, or perhaps outside, near the stone pile?" Ridley's face reddened, and he fumbled. Hastings whispered, "He's hiding something, isn't he? He's nervous as a cat." "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied. "But it is not only fear. It is guilt, perhaps, or loyalty. We must watch him closely." The day wore on with further questions, each revealing small inconsistencies. Major Harold Blake, when asked about the scarab, claimed ignorance, his gruff demeanor masking a flicker of unease. Lady Beatrice, questioned again, admitted to seeing Ridley near the stone pile earlier in the day, but her account was vague, her tears quick to surface. Sir Reginald, impatient with Poirot's probing, insisted the scarab was unimportant, a minor artifact lost in the shuffle. By evening, Poirot and Hastings sat once more in their tent, the lantern casting long shadows. Poirot's pocketbook was open, and he drew a small diagram, a map of the camp, with the tomb, the stone pile, and the positions of each suspect marked. "The scarab," Poirot said, tapping the page. "It is the key, but not in the way they think. It was not stolen, nor lost. It was hidden, then revealed as the amulet to create a false trail. But this mark in the sand, it tells us something was taken, something small, something precious, and the one who took it is among us." Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "You think the scarab is the amulet? But why go to such lengths to hide it, then reveal it?" Poirot's smile was grim. "Because, mon ami, the murderer seeks to control the narrative. They wish us to see theft, not murder. But the little gray cells, they see through the deception. The scarab, the mark, the lies, they point to one truth. Amher's death was no accident, and the motive lies in the shadows of this camp." As the desert night deepened, the tomb loomed in the distance, its secrets as impenetrable as the stars above. But Poirot's mind was a beacon, cutting through the darkness, and Hastings knew the truth was closer than ever. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The desert morning broke with a deceptive serenity, the golden light filtering through the canvas of the expedition camp's tents, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the secrets lurking within. The death of Amher, the discovery of the Anubis amulet, and the faint chisel mark in the sand had tightened the web of suspicion around the camp, and the air crackled with unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, ever the master of observation, moved through this charged atmosphere with a calm that belied the storm brewing in his mind. His little gray cells, as he often called them, were at work, piecing together the fragments of truth hidden beneath layers of deception. Captain Arthur Hastings followed Poirot as they navigated the camp, the detective's precise steps. Worthington, determined to maintain control, barked orders from the center of the camp, his voice carrying the weight of authority, but tinged with an edge of desperation. The expedition team, though outwardly focused on their tasks, exchanged guarded glances, each aware that Poirot's investigation was peeling back the veneer of civility. "Poirot," Hastings said, keeping his voice low as they approached the artifact storage tent. "That chisel mark you found, it's got to be significant. Do you think someone was trying to hide something from the tomb?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching slightly. "Précisément, mon ami. The mark, it is a whisper of truth in a chorus of lies. Something was taken or altered in the moment of Amher's death. The amulet, it is a distraction, but the chisel mark, it points to a deeper motive. Today we shall uncover more of these lies, for they are beginning to surface, like ripples in the Nile." Their first task was to revisit the artifact storage tent, where Dr. Evelyn Carter was cataloging items with her usual meticulousness. Her notebook, now a familiar sight, lay open on a table strewn with artifacts, golden statuettes, alabaster jars, and fragments of ancient pottery. Poirot entered with his customary courtesy, but his questions were sharper, more direct. "Dr. Carter," he began, "the golden scarab you listed in your inventory, it is most curious, non? Its description is vague, yet you are a woman of precision. Why is this item so elusive?" Dr. Carter's hand paused over her notebook, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a flicker of defiance. "As I told you, Monsieur Poirot, it's a minor artifact. We've been overwhelmed with cataloging, and some items are still awaiting full documentation." Poirot tilted his head, his expression one of polite skepticism. "And yet this scarab, it is not among the items here, nor in the tomb. Could it be that it was removed, perhaps by someone who wished to conceal its importance?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, Hastings thought she might snap. but she composed herself, her voice cool. "If you're implying theft, Monsieur Poirot, I suggest you look to the workers. They're the ones handling the artifacts, not me." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but Hastings knew better. The detective's eyes lingered on Dr. Carter's notebook, on the way her fingers gripped it, as if it held more than just scholarly notes. Their next interview was with Thomas Ridley, who was found outside the tomb, sorting through a crate of tools. His nervousness was palpable, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he fumbled with a chisel. Poirot's questions were gentle but relentless, circling back to Ridley's movements on the day of Amer's death. "Mr. Ridley," Poirot said, "you were seen near the stone pile by Lady Beatrice, yet you claim you were in the tomb with Dr. Carter. This contradiction, it troubles me. Can you
Explain it." Ridley's face flushed, his hands trembling. "I may have stepped outside briefly to fetch a tool. It was nothing important. I didn't see anything, I swear." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, "your shoes, they carry the sand of the camp, not the dust of the tomb. And this chisel," he gestured to the tool in Ridley's hand, "it is much like the one that left the mark near Amer's body. Were you using it that day, perhaps?" Ridley's eyes widened, and he dropped the chisel, his stammer worsening. I don't know what you mean. I didn't do anything." Poirot's smile was almost pitying. "Calm yourself, Mr. Ridley. Hercule Poirot does not accuse without evidence, but the truth, it will come, whether you wish it or not." The interview with Major Harold Blake was less forthcoming. The retired soldier sat heavily in the storage tent, his flask nowhere in sight, but his breath carrying the faint tang of whiskey. Poirot's questions about his military past drew curt responses, but when pressed about his presence near the stone pile, Blake's scowl deepened. "I was doing my job, Poirot," he growled, "keeping the workers in line. Didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. Until that scream." "And your flask," Poirot said, his tone mild. "It is your constant companion, no? Yet yesterday, during our first interview, it was not in your hand. Why was this?" Blake's eyes narrowed, his hand twitching as if reaching for the absent flask. "What's that got to do with anything? I don't need a drink every second of the day." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were sharp. "Of course. But the absence of a habit, it is as telling as its presence." Lady Beatrice was the most revealing, though her answers were cloaked in tears and hesitation. In her private tent, surrounded by delicate furnishings that seemed out of place in the desert, she twisted her hands as Poirot questioned her about her husband's temper. "Reginald is passionate," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wants this expedition to succeed, to prove himself. But he's under pressure, investors, rivals, the newspapers. It makes him harsh." "And you, madame?" Poirot said gently. "You have seen things, no? Things that make you afraid. Tell me, what did you see near the stone pile, before Amer's death?" Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "I don't know. I saw someone, perhaps, a shadow moving quickly, but it was so fast I couldn't be sure. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, this place is cursed." Poirot's expression softened, but his questions did not relent. "A shadow, you see?"
One of the workers, a young man named Karim, approached Poirot hesitantly, his eyes darting towards Sir Reginald's tent. Through a translator, he revealed that Amer had been seen arguing with someone the night before his death, a heated exchange near the edge of the camp, under cover of darkness. It was a man, Karim said, his voice low, tall, angry. I couldn't see his face, but Amer was afraid. Poirot's eyes gleamed, And this argument? What was it about? Karim shook his head. I couldn't hear the words, Effendi, but Amr, he was shaking when he returned to the workers' tents. This revelation sent ripples through Poirot's investigation, and he spent the afternoon cross-referencing alibis and movements. Sir Reginald, when questioned, denied any knowledge of an argument, his temper flaring at the suggestion. Amr was a worker, nothing more, he snapped. If he had disputes, they were his own. But the lies were surfacing, each one a crack in the facade of the camp. Dr. Carter's guarded demeanor, Ridley's nervous contradictions, Blake's evasive gruffness, Lady Beatrice's tearful vagueness, and Sir Reginald's defensive anger, all pointed to a web of hidden motives. Poirot, in the quiet of their tent, drew another diagram, marking the positions of each suspect at the time of Amr's death, the chisel mark, and the mysterious argument. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. The lies, they are like the sands, shifting, but not without pattern. Amr's death was no accident, and this argument, it is the key. Someone in this camp feared what Amr knew, and they silenced him. But the truth, it cannot be silenced forever. Hastings shivered, the weight of Poirot's words settling over him. The camp, with its closed circle of suspects, felt more like a trap with each passing hour, and the tomb's shadow loomed larger, its secrets whispering of more lies yet to be uncovered. Chapter 9. The Shadow of Anubis. The following is a fictional continuation of Agatha Christie's The Adventure of the Egyptian Tomb, presented as Chapter 9 of an imagined audiobook titled Hercule Poirot's Pharaoh's Fury, Tomb Terror. Narrated in the voice of Captain Arthur Hastings, it maintains the style and tone of Christie's original work. The desert night pressed heavily upon us, its vast silence broken only by the occasional cry of a distant jackal. I stood at the entrance of our tent, my eyes fixed on the star-strewn sky, my mind a whirl of unease. The events of the past days, the deaths, the whispers of an ancient curse, and Poirot's enigmatic behavior had left me restless. The air was thick with the scent of sand and mystery, and I could not shake the feeling that some unseen force watched our every move. Inside the tent, Hercule Poirot sat at a small folding table, his neat figure illuminated by the flickering light of an oil lamp. He was, as ever, immaculate, despite the dust that plagued us all. His patent leather boots, though dulled by the desert's relentless grit, were polished to a semblance of their former glory. He sipped a cup of chamomile tea, his eyes narrowed in thought, his little gray cells no doubt working at a furious pace. "Hastings," he said at last, breaking the silence. "You stand there like a sentinel, but what do you guard against? The specter of Men-Her-Ra, perhaps?" His tone was teasing, yet there was a sharpness beneath it, as if he sensed my disquiet. I turned to face him, my brow furrowed. "Poirot, you cannot deny that something sinister is at work here. 3 deaths, Sir John Willard, Mr. Bleibner, and now young Rupert in New York. And then there's the matter of the American, Schneider, struck down by tetanus. It's too much for coincidence, surely." Poirot set down his cup with a delicate clink. "Coincidence, mon ami, is the refuge of the unimaginative. There is no curse here, no wrath of an ancient pharaoh. There is only the mind of man, cunning and deceitful, weaving a tapestry of fear to conceal a darker truth." I sighed,
exasperated. But you yourself spoke of the supernatural, Poirot. You told Lady Willard you believed in the power of superstition. You even had Hassan dress as Anubis to test Dr. Ames. What am I to make of that? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ah, Hastings, you misunderstand me. I do not believe in curses, but I believe in the power of belief itself. Superstition is a force that can drive men to madness or to murder, or perhaps one of the workers moving about the camp. But come, let us investigate. The night holds secrets, and Hercule Poirot does not rest until they are uncovered. We stepped out into the cool desert air, the sand crunching beneath our boots. The camp was quiet, the tents glowing faintly from within, their canvas walls casting eerie shadows. The moan came again, fainter now, from the direction of the excavation site. Poirot motioned for me to follow, and we moved silently toward the tomb of Men-Hara. The entrance to the tomb loomed before us, a black maw in the moonlight. The air here was colder, heavier, as if the weight of centuries pressed down upon us. I shivered, my imagination conjuring images of jackal-headed gods and vengeful spirits. Poirot, however, was unmoved. He produced a small torch from his pocket and shone its beam into the darkness. "Stay close, Hastings," he murmured, "and keep your revolver at the ready. Not for spirits, but for men who are far more dangerous." We descended the rough-hewn steps into the tomb, the air growing mustier with each step. The torchlight danced on the walls, illuminating faded hieroglyphs and carvings of ancient deities. I could not help but feel a pang of awe, despite my unease. This was the resting place of a king, a place of power and mystery, untouched for millennia until Sir John Willard's expedition had breached its sanctity. We reached the main chamber, where the sarcophagus of Men-Hara stood, its stone lid now removed, to reveal the treasures within. The artifacts had been catalogued and sent to Cairo, but the chamber still held an air of reverence. Poirot moved slowly, his torch sweeping the room, his eyes searching for something I could not discern. "Poirot," I whispered, "what are we looking for?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he knelt beside a pile of rubble in the corner, his fingers probing the sand. "Aha," he said softly, holding up a small object that glinted in the torchlight. It was a vial, no larger than a thimble, made of glass and stoppered with a cork. "What is it?" I asked, leaning closer. Poirot's expression was grim. "A clue, Hastings, a very dangerous clue. This is no relic of the pharaohs, but a modern creation. I suspect it contains a substance most deadly." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Poison?" "Précisément," Poirot said, slipping the vial into his pocket. "But we must be cautious. The one who placed this here may still be near." "As if it came to see."
Poirot regarded him with a piercing gaze.
"Noises, you say? And yet you did not call out or raise the alarm. Why is that, Hassan?" The man shifted uncomfortably. I thought it might be nothing. The workers, they speak of spirits, of Anubis walking the night. I did not wish to cause panic." Poirot's smile was thin. "A commendable concern, but I think there is more to your presence here. Tell me, Hassan, what do you know of this vial?" He held up the glass container, and Hassan's eyes widened further.
I know nothing of it, monsieur, he protested. I swear by the gods. Enough, Poirot interrupted. The gods have no place in this matter. Return to the camp, Hassan, and speak of this to no one. We will discuss it further in the morning. Hassan hesitated, then bowed and retreated up the steps. I watched him go, my mind racing. Poirot, do you suspect him? Poirot shook his head. Not yet, Hastings, but he knows more than he says. The vial, the deaths, the whispers of a curse. All are connected. We must proceed with care. We returned to the camp, the night now silent once more, but sleep eluded me. The image of the vial, small and innocuous, yet potentially deadly, haunted my thoughts. Poirot, however, seemed unperturbed. He sat at his table scribbling notes, his face a mask of concentration. The next morning the camp was abuzz with tension. Lady Willard, pale and anxious, approached us as we emerged from our tent. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling, I fear for my son. Guy is determined to continue the excavation, but I feel the curse tightening its grip. Please, you must protect him. Poirot took her hand, his manner gentle but firm. Madame, there is no curse, but there is danger, and I will uncover its source. Trust in the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and retreated. I turned to Poirot, my frustration mounting. You keep saying there is no curse, yet you play along with this talk of spirits. Why? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Because, Hastings, the murderer wishes us to believe in the curse. It is a smokescreen, a clever distraction. But I, Hercule Poirot, am not so easily deceived. Come, we must speak with Dr. Ames again. We found the expedition's physician in his tent, poring over medical records. He looked up as Ames' face paled. It was found in the tomb, hidden among the rubble. What can you tell me of it? Ames hesitated, then shook his head. I know nothing of it. Perhaps it was left by one of the workers. Poirot's smile was cold. Or perhaps it was placed there by someone with a motive to kill. Tell me, Doctor, what is your connection to Rupert Bleibner? The question caught Ames off guard. He stammered. Rupert, I barely knew him. He was Mr. Bleibner's nephew, a troubled young man. Troubled, yes, Poirot said, and dead by his own hand, or so it seems. But I have learned that Rupert was Mr. Bleibner's heir, and that you, Doctor, were close to him. Close enough, perhaps, to know his secrets. Ames stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is absurd. I am a physician, not a murderer. Then you will not mind if I examine your medical supplies, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. Hastings, fetch Mr. Schneider's assistant, if you please. I hurried to comply, my heart pounding. The pieces were falling into place, though I could not yet see the full picture. When I returned with the assistant, Poirot was already rifling through Ames's medical kit. He held up another vial identical to the one from the tomb. Curious, no? Poirot said. 2 vials, both containing a substance I suspect is not medicinal. Dr. Ames, I believe you have used your position to orchestrate these deaths, disguising them as the work of a curse. So John, Mr. Bleibner, Schneider, all stood in the way of your ambition, and Rupert, poor Rupert, was your final victim, driven to despair by your manipulations. Ames's face twisted with rage. You have no proof. But I will, Poirot said. The little gray cells, they do not fail. Hastings, secure the doctor.
We will take him to Cairo, where the authorities will test these vials. As I moved to restrain Ames, he lunged for the tent flap, but Poirot was quicker. With a deft movement, he tripped the doctor, sending him sprawling. I pinned him down, my revolver at the ready. The camp erupted in chaos as the truth came to light. Dr. Ames, it transpired, had been Rupert's secret confidant, manipulating him to eliminate his uncle and others who stood to inherit the expedition's wealth. The vials contained a rare poison, administered subtly to mimic natural causes. The curse of Men-Hera was nothing more than a clever ruse, fueled by superstition and fear. As we prepared to leave the camp, Poirot stood beside me, gazing at the tomb. "You see, Hastings," he said, "the true curse is greed. It drives men to unspeakable acts, but it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot."
Anticipation. The desert's silence broken only by the rustle of canvas and the distant murmur of the workers. Hercule Poirot's trap, set with the precision of a master strategist, had sent ripples of panic through the closed circle of suspects. The promise of a search for the missing golden scarab, coupled with Poirot's cryptic assertion that it would unmask Amer's killer, had left the camp on edge. The central tent, where Poirot had gathered the expedition team once more, was a crucible of tension. Its lantern-lit walls casting shadows that seemed to dance with the secrets of the tomb. Captain Arthur Hastings sat at Poirot's side, his heart pounding as he watched the detective prepare for the final act. Poirot's small, neat figure was a study in calm, his linen suit immaculate, his mustache perfectly waxed, but his green eyes burned with the intensity of a man who had solved the puzzle. The suspects, Sir Reginald Worthington, Dr. Evelyn Carter, Thomas Ridley, Major Harold Blake, and Lady Beatrice Worthington, sat in a tight circle, their faces a gallery of fear, defiance, and unease. The air was heavy with the weight of what was to come. Poirot rose, his voice clear and commanding, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the time has come to unveil the truth. Amer's death was no accident, no mere misfortune of the desert. It was murder, calculated and deliberate, and the murderer sits among us. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal the one who struck the fatal blow and the motive that drove them to it." Sir Reginald's face reddened, his fists clenching. "This is preposterous, Poirot. You've stirred up enough trouble with your accusations. If you have proof, show it, or let us get back to work." Poirot's smile was serene but unyielding. "Patience, Sir Reginald. The proof, it is here in the details, in the contradictions, in the lies that have unraveled like threads in a tapestry. Let us begin at the beginning." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice weaving a narrative that held the room captive. "Amer was killed by a stone, but not by chance. The chisel mark in the sand, it told us the stone was no accident. It was lifted, swung, and placed to suggest a collapse. The Anubis amulet found nearby was a red herring, a clever distraction to point to theft or curses. But the real clue was the golden scarab, listed in Dr. Carter's inventory, but missing from the tomb. This scarab, it was not stolen for greed, but hidden to conceal a greater crime." Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. Major Blake, whose hand trembled as he reached for his absent flask. "Major Blake, you argued with Amer the night before his death. You were seen, heard, shouting about a betrayal. What was it Amer knew? A secret from your past, perhaps? A crime from your military days?" Blake's face flushed, his voice hoarse. "I told you.
I didn't kill him. Amber was meddling, asking questions about things that didn't concern him. I warned him to stop, that's all. And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, your fear, it betrays you. You are a man haunted, Major, but not by murder. Your secret is not the key to this crime. Poirot's gaze shifted to Sir Reginald, whose scowl deepened. And you, Sir Reginald. You too argued with Amber about debts, about secrets that could ruin you. Lady Beatrice heard you, saw you near the workers' tents. What was it Amber knew that made you so angry? Sir Reginald's voice was a low growl. Beatrice was mistaken. I was in my tent, working. I had no reason to speak to Amber, let alone kill him. Lady Beatrice's voice, trembling but clear, cut through the room. You're lying, Reginald. I saw you. You were furious, saying Amber would ruin everything. I didn't want to believe it, but I can't stay silent anymore. The tent was electric with tension, every eye on Sir Reginald, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. Madame, your courage is admirable, but Sir Reginald, he is not the murderer. His anger, it is real, but his crime is one of greed, not murder. The debts he spoke of, they are the motive, but not for him. Poirot turned to Thomas Ridley, whose face was pale, his spectacles slipping down his nose. Mr. Ridley, you have been most nervous, no? Your shoes, they carried the sand of the camp, not the dust of the tomb. You were seen near the stone pile, and you confessed to looking for something. What was it, Mr. Ridley? The scarab, perhaps? Ridley's voice was a whisper, his hand shaking. I didn't kill him. I was looking for the scarab, yes, but only because Dr. Carter asked me to. She said it was important, that it had to be found. Dr. Carter's composure cracked, her voice rising. That's absurd. I never asked him to look for anything. He's lying. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and he stepped closer to Dr. Carter, his voice a quiet thunder. No, Dr. Carter, it is you who lie. The scarab in your notebook, in the page you tore out, the page that described the scarab's inscription. A warning, not of a curse, but of a historical truth, one that could ruin your reputation. Amur, he saw you take it, and he confronted you. You argued, and when he threatened to expose you, you killed him, using the stone to stage an accident. Dr. Carter's eyes widened, her composure shattered. No, I didn't, I couldn't. But Poirot pressed on, relentless. The chisel mark, it was yours, used to pry the scarab from its hiding place. The amulet, you placed it to suggest theft, to divert suspicion. But the sand, it betrayed you. Undisturbed around the amulet, but marked by your chisel. And your notebook, it is incomplete. The torn page, a confession of your guilt. Dr. Carter sank into her chair, her hands covering her face. I didn't mean to kill him, she whispered, her voice breaking. He was going to tell everyone about the inscription, about my mistake. I misread a key hieroglyph, claimed a discovery that wasn't mine. If it came out, my career was over. I just wanted him to stop, to be quiet. The stone, it was an impulse, a moment of panic. The tent was frozen, the weight of her confession crushing the air. Sir Reginald stared, his anger replaced by shock. Ridley's face was ashen. Blake's jaw set, and Lady Beatrice's tears flowed silently. Hastings, stunned, looked to Poirot, who stood calm and resolute. "Dr. Carter," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "You sought to protect your name, but in doing so, you took a life. The truth, it cannot be buried, not even in the sands of Egypt." As the workers were called to escort Dr. Carter to confinement, the camp seemed to exhale, the tension breaking like a storm. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression one of quiet triumph. "The little gray cells, mon ami. They do not fail. The truth, it is always there, waiting to be found." The tomb of Pharaoh Khemtu loomed in the distance, its secrets now laid bare, but its shadow lingered, a reminder of the cost of human ambition. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The desert dawn broke over the expedition camp with a quiet solemnity, the first rays of sunlight gilding the sands and casting long shadows from the tents. The revelation of Dr. Evelyn Carter's guilt had left the camp in a state of stunned silence, the weight of her confession settling like dust after a storm. The tomb of Pharaoh Khemtu, once a beacon of ambition and discovery, now stood as a silent witness to human folly, its ancient warnings no longer dismissed.
Authorities from Cairo. Her career and freedom shattered by a moment of panic. The camp, though still functional, was subdued. The workers moving with a quiet efficiency, their whispers of curses replaced by murmurs of justice. Sir Reginald Worthington, his authority shaken but intact, had resumed his oversight of the excavation, though his booming voice lacked its usual vigor. Major Harold Blake, Thomas Ridley, and Lady Beatrice each grappled with their own roles in the tragedy, their faces marked by a mixture of relief and guilt. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low as he stood beside the detective, "you've done it again. You saw through the lies, the distractions, and found the truth. But I must say, it's a grim business. Dr. Carter seems so composed, so scholarly. I never would have suspected her." Poirot turned, his green eyes reflective, his mustache a perfect curve of waxed precision. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "The human heart, it is a labyrinth, even to those who think they know it well. Dr. Carter, she was a woman of intellect, of ambition, but also of fear. It is fear that drives such acts, fear of shame, of loss, of ruin. Hercule Poirot does not judge, only observes, and the little gray cells, they see what others overlook." Hastings nodded, his gaze drifting to the tomb's entrance, its dark maw now a symbol of closure rather than mystery. That scarab, the chisel mark, the amulet, you pieced it all together. But what made you so certain it was Dr. Carter? There were so many red herrings. Blake's argument, Sir Reginald's temper, Ridley's nervousness. Poirot's smile was faint, almost melancholic. "The red herrings, Hastings, they are the smoke that hides the fire, but the fire, it always burns true. The chisel mark, it was the first clue, a sign of deliberation, not accident. The amulet, it was too perfect, too convenient, placed to suggest theft. But the scarab, listed in Dr. Carter's notebook yet missing, it was the key. Her notebook, it was her shield, but also her confession, the torn page, the vague entry, they betrayed her. And her composure, it was a mask, worn thin by guilt." Hastings shook his head, marveling at Poirot's clarity. "And the arguments with Amr? Blake and Sir Reginald, they seemed so guilty." "Oui," Poirot said, his hands clasped behind his back. "Major Blake, he is a man haunted by his past, perhaps by debts or misdeeds, but his anger with Amr was not murderous. It was fear of exposure, not intent to kill. Sir Reginald, his temper and his debts made him a suspect, but his crime was one of pride, not murder. Lady Beatrice, her fear drove her to speak, and Ridley, his loyalty to Dr. Carter made him complicit to the darkness they had uncovered." Hastings felt a pang of sadness for Dr. Carter, whose brilliance had been undone by a single fatal mistake. "It's a pity," he said at last. "She could have been great, couldn't she?" Poirot's expression softened, a rare glimpse of compassion in his usually analytical demeanor. "Greatness, mon ami, it is a fragile thing. It requires not only intellect, but honor, courage, and humility. Dr. Carter, she let ambition cloud her judgment, and in her panic, she lost everything. It is a lesson, Hastings, that the pursuit of glory must never outweigh the value of a life." As they turned back toward the camp, Poirot's gaze lingered on the tomb, its ancient stones etched with warnings that now seemed all too prescient. "The pharaohs, they built their tombs to guard their secrets," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "But the secrets of the living, they are far more dangerous. Hercule Poirot, he does not believe in curses, but he believes in justice, and justice has been served." The camp was stirring to life, the workers resuming their tasks under Sir Reginald's watchful eye. Major Blake, his flask once more in hand, nodded curtly to Poirot as they passed, a grudging respect in his eyes. Ridley, still pale and nervous, avoided their gaze, his loyalty to Dr. Carter now a source of shame. Lady Beatrice, standing at the edge of her tent, offered a tentative smile, her fragility tempered by a new-found strength. Sir Reginald, though shaken, had already begun planning the next phase of the excavation, his ambition undimmed by the tragedy. "Will you stay, Poirot?" Hastings asked as they reached their tent, where their belongings were packed for departure. "The tomb's secrets are safe now, but there's still so much to uncover." Poirot shook his head, his eyes twinkling with a familiar spark. "No, mon ami, the tomb, it belongs to the archaeologists now. Hercule Poirot, he has uncovered the only secret that matters, the truth of Amer's death. My work here is done, and there are other mysteries, other puzzles, waiting for the little gray cells." As they prepared to leave, Poirot took one last look at the camp, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "The desert, Hastings, it is vast and unforgiving, but it cannot hide the truth from Hercule Poirot. Come, let us return to civilization, where the tea is hot and the dust does not cling so stubbornly to my shoes." Hastings chuckled, the weight of the secret safe for another day. Poirot, ever the philosopher, murmured, "The human heart, mon ami, it is the greatest mystery of all, and Hercule Poirot, he will never tire of solving it." Chapter 12. Echoes of the Past. The desert sun climbed steadily, its heat a relentless reminder of the unforgiving landscape that cradled the expedition camp. Though Dr. Evelyn Carter's confession had brought resolution to Amer's murder, a subtle unease lingered, like the faint hum of a distant storm. The camp had resumed its work, with Sir Reginald Worthington's booming voice directing the workers as they catalogued the tomb's treasures, but the shadow of the recent tragedy clung to every interaction. Hercule Poirot, ever vigilant, sensed that the case, though closed, had left ripples that could yet disturb the surface of this fragile enclave. Captain Arthur Hastings walked beside Poirot as they made their way through the camp, the detective's small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the dust and disarray around them. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the tents, the workers, and the distant tomb, as if searching for something overlooked. Their departure for Cairo was scheduled for the following morning, but Poirot had insisted on one final day to tidy the loose ends, as he put it, a phrase that filled Hastings with both curiosity and apprehension. "Poirot," Hastings said, adjusting his pith helmet against the sun, "you've solved the case. Dr. Carter confessed, the murderers caught, and the camp's back to work. What loose ends could possibly remain?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, the case, it is like a mosaic. Each piece must fit perfectly, or the picture is incomplete. Dr. Carter, she has confessed, but there are questions still unanswered. The arguments of Major Blake and Sir Reginald with Aymer, the nervous glances of Mr. Ridley, the fear in Lady Beatrice's eyes. These are not mere coincidences. They are echoes of a deeper truth, and Hercule Poirot does not leave echoes unanswered." Their first task was to revisit the artifact storage tent, where Thomas Ridley was sorting through crates under the watchful eye of a new supervisor, a stern-faced archaeologist sent from Cairo to replace Dr. Carter. Ridley's hands trembled as he worked, his spectacles slipping down his nose, and his eyes darted toward Poirot as the detective entered. "Mr. Ridley," Poirot said, his voice gentle but probing, "you have been most cooperative, but there is one matter yet to clarify. The night before Aymer's death, you saw Major Blake argue with—" Poirot's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing. "And yet your hesitation, it speaks louder than your words. You are loyal to Dr. Carter, no? Did she ask you to keep silent about something else? Something connected to the scarab, perhaps?" Ridley's shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper. She didn't ask me to lie, but she was worried. She said the scarab's inscription could ruin her, that it proved she'd made a mistake in her translations. I wanted to help her, so I kept quiet about seeing her near the stone pile that day. I thought it was just about her work. Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "Merci, Mr. Ridley. Your loyalty, it is admirable, but it has cost you peace. The truth, it is always better, even when it hurts." Their next stop was Major Harold Blake, who was found near the workers' tents, his flask in hand and his face flushed with more than just the desert heat. Poirot's questions were direct, focusing on the argument Ridley had overheard. "Major Blake," he said, "Aymer spoke of betrayal. What was this betrayal, and why did it anger you so?" Blake's scowl deepened, his hand tightening around the flask. "I told you, Poirot, it was nothing. Aymer was nosy, always asking questions about the artifacts, about what we were doing. I told him to mind his own business, that's all. No betrayal, just a worker stepping out of line." Poirot's smile was thin. "And yet, your anger, it was not merely at his questions, was it? You are a man with a past, Major, a past that perhaps Aymer stumbled upon. A debt, a scandal, something that made you fear exposure?" Blake's eyes flashed, but he said nothing. His silence, as telling as any confession. Poirot did not press further, instead turning to Hastings with a murmured, "The Major, he hides something, but it is not murder. His secret, it is his own." Lady Beatrice was next, found in her tent, her delicate frame wrapped in a shawl despite the heat. Her eyes, red from crying, met Poirot's with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Madame," Poirot said gently,
You spoke of your husband's argument with Amer, of debts and secrets. Tell me, what do you know of these debts? What burden does Sir Reginald carry?" Lady Beatrice's hands twisted together, her voice trembling. "Reginald, he's always been ambitious. But this expedition, it's everything to him. He borrowed heavily to fund it, more than he can repay. I heard him talking to someone, a creditor.
Tomb was his salvation. The final interview was with Sir Reginald himself, who met them in the central tent, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "you've had your victory. Carter's confessed, the case is closed. Why do you keep stirring the pot?" Poirot's expression was serene but unyielding. "Sir Reginald, the case, it is closed, but the echoes remain. Your debts, they are a heavy burden, no? Amer knew of them, perhaps through overhearing a conversation with your creditor. Why did you not tell me of this argument?" Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing. "Because it's none of your business. Yes, I argued with Amer. He was snooping, asking questions about my finances, threatening to tell the workers. I told him to keep his mouth shut, or he'd regret it. But I didn't kill him." Poirot nodded, his gaze steady. "I believe you, Sir Reginald. Your crime is one of pride and desperation, not murder. But the truth, it must be complete." As the day drew to a close, Poirot and Hastings sat in their tent, the lantern casting flickering shadows. Poirot's pocketbook lay open, his notes a map of the case's intricacies. "Mon ami," he said, "the echoes of the past, they tell us much. Dr. Carter killed Amer to protect her reputation. But the others, they too had secrets. Blake's past, Ridley's loyalty, Sir Reginald's debts, Lady Beatrice's fear, these are the threads that wove the tapestry of this crime. Each played a part, however small, in creating the conditions for murder." Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "So, it's truly over? No more surprises?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The case, it is closed. But life, it is never without surprises. We leave tomorrow, Hastings, but the desert, it will keep its secrets a little longer." As the camp settled into the night, the tomb of Pharaoh Kemtu stood silent, its ancient stones bearing witness to the frailties of the human heart. Poirot, with his unerring logic, had brought justice, but the echoes of the past lingered, a reminder that truth, once uncovered, leaves its mark on all who hear it. Chapter 13. The Final Threads. The desert morning was crisp, the air carrying a faint chill as the sun rose over the expedition camp, painting the sands in hues of amber and gold. The resolution of Amer's murder had brought a semblance of order, but the camp remained a fragile microcosm, its sweat from his brow. The events of the past days, Dr. Evelyn Carter's confession, the revelations of arguments and debts, the tangled web of motives, had left him both awed and exhausted. Poirot's ability to unravel the truth was nothing short of miraculous, but Hastings sensed that his friend was not entirely satisfied, as if some subtle detail still eluded him. "Poirot," Hastings said, keeping pace as they walked toward the central tent. "You've caught the murderer, exposed the lies, and set the camp back on track. What more is there to do? Surely we can leave this blasted desert and get back to a proper cup of tea. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Mon ami, the tea, it will wait. The case, it is solved, oui, but the human heart, it is never so simple. There are threads yet to be woven into the tapestry, small perhaps, but necessary for the harmony of Hercule Poirot's mind. Today, we tie these threads, and then we depart. Their first task was to revisit the artifact storage tent, where the new supervisor, a dour man named Dr. Hensley, was overseeing the cataloging of the tomb's treasures. Thomas Ridley, still pale and nervous, worked quietly under his direction, his hands trembling as he handled a golden statuette. Poirot approached with his usual courtesy, his voice gentle but probing. "Mr. Ridley," he said, "you have been most forthcoming about Dr. Carter's actions, but there is one matter that troubles me. The chisel mark near the stone pile. It was made by a tool you were seen with. Did you perhaps use it to aid Dr. Carter in hiding the scarab?" Ridley's spectacles slipped down his nose, his eyes wide with panic. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I swear I didn't touch the scarab. I was near the stone pile, yes, but only because Dr. Carter asked me to check the tools. I used the chisel to pry open a crate, that's all." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, but his tone remained calm. "And this crate, Mr. Ridley, what did it contain? Something that Dr. Carter wished to keep hidden, perhaps?" Ridley's face crumpled, his voice barely audible. "It was just supplies, I thought, but she was so insistent, and later I saw her with the scarab, tucking it into her notebook. I didn't know what to do, so I kept quiet." Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "Merci, Mr. Ridley. Your silence, it protected Dr. Carter, but it also protected you. The truth, it is better now, no?" Their next stop was Major Harold Blake, who was found near the workers' tents, his flask in hand and his face bloodshot but defiant.
"You're digging in the wrong place, Poirot. Yes, Amr was nosy, asking about my time in the army, about things that happened years ago. I told him to drop it, that's all. I didn't kill him." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And yet, your fear, it is palpable. What was it Amr knew, Major? A court-martial, perhaps? A scandal that could ruin you?" Blake's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, his silence a confession of its own. Poirot did not press further, instead turning to Hastings with a murmured, "The Major's secret, it is not murder, but it is a burden he carries. We leave it to him." Lady Beatrice was found in her tent, her delicate frame wrapped in a shawl, her eyes red but resolute. Poirot's questions were gentle, focusing on her husband's debts and the mysterious creditor. "Madame," he said, "you spoke of Sir Reginald's fear, of a creditor who holds power over him. Have you learned more of this person, or of what Amr might have known?" Lady Beatrice's hands trembled, but her voice was steadier than before. "I've heard nothing more, Monsieur Poirot, but I know Reginald was desperate. The expedition was his chance to pay off the debts, to restore his name. Amr, he must have heard something, perhaps about the creditor's demands. Reginald was so angry that night, I feared he might do something terrible." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, Madame, your husband did not kill Amr. His anger was real, but his crime was one of pride, not murder. You have been brave to speak, and your courage, it has helped bring justice." The final conversation was with Sir Reginald himself, who met them in the central tent, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "you've had your triumph. Carter's confessed, the case is closed. Why do you keep poking at old wounds?" Poirot's expression was serene but firm. Sir Reginald, the wounds, they are not so old. Your debts, they drove you to desperation, and Amer, he knew of them. Did he threaten to expose you to your creditor, or to the investors who fund this expedition? Sir Reginald's eyes flashed, but his voice was steady. Amer was a worker, nothing more. Yes, he overheard me speaking with my creditor, a man in Cairo, a ruthless sort. Amer tried to use it against me, said he'd tell the workers, stir up trouble. I told him to keep quiet or he'd regret it, but I didn't kill him, Poirot. That was Carter's doing. Poirot nodded, his gaze unwavering. Oui, Sir Reginald, and the truth, it has been found. Your debts, they are your burden, but not your crime. Hercule Poirot seeks only to understand, to complete the picture.
As crime was one of panic, but the others, Blake, Ridley, Sir Reginald, Lady Beatrice, they each played a part, however small, in the tapestry of this tragedy. Their secrets, their fears, they created the conditions for murder. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. And the creditor? Do you think he's still a threat to Sir Reginald? Poirot's smile was faint. The creditor, he is a shadow, but not our concern. Sir Reginald must face his own battles. Our work, it is done, and the truth, it is complete. The camp, now bathed in the soft light of dusk, seemed to breathe easier, its secrets laid bare. The tomb of Pharaoh Khemtu stood silent, its ancient warnings no longer a mystery, but a reminder of the cost of human ambition. As Poirot and Hastings prepared for their departure, the desert stretched endlessly before them, its sands holding no more secrets for Hercule Poirot's little gray cells. Chapter 14. The final day in the expedition camp dawned with a stillness that seemed to hush even the restless sands of the desert. The sun rose slowly, its light filtering through a haze of dust, casting a soft, almost mournful glow over the tents and the looming silhouette of Pharaoh Khemtu's tomb. The resolution of Amer murder had brought a fragile peace, still attuned to the subtle currents of human emotion that lingered in the air. The Captain Arthur Hastings packed their belongings with a sense of relief, eager to leave the oppressive haste and tension of the desert behind. Poirot, ever the meticulous observer, prepared for departure, his mind satisfied with the truth uncovered, but still attuned to the subtle currents of human emotion that lingered in the air. Captain Arthur Hastings packed their belongings with a sense of relief, eager to leave the oppressive heat and constant grit of sand. Was a welcome one, yet Poirot, with his unerring instinct for completeness, insisted on one final round of the camp, as if to ensure that no shadow of doubt remained. Focus. Their fear of curses replaced by a pragmatic determination to complete the excavation. Sir Reginald Worthington, though subdued, stood at the center of the activity, his voice carrying less of its former bluster as he oversaw the cataloging of artifacts. Major Harold Blake, his flask ever present, lingered near the workers' tents, his gruff demeanor softened by a hint of introspection. Thomas Ridley, still nervous, worked diligently in the artifact tent, his loyalty to Dr. Carter now a bittersweet memory. Lady Beatrice, fragile but resolute, stood at the edge of her tent, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if seeking escape. Poirot's first stop was to speak with Dr. Hensley, whose no-nonsense approach had restored order to the cataloging process. The archaeologist, a wiry man with a clipped beard, greeted Poirot with a nod, his hands busy with a ledger. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "your work here has been remarkable. The camp's back on track,
and we're making progress with the tomb. I trust you're satisfied with the outcome?" Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Satisfied, Dr. Hensley. The truth has been found, and justice served. But tell me, have you noticed anything unusual in the inventory since Dr. Carter's departure? A missing item, perhaps, or a discrepancy?" Hensley frowned, flipping through his ledger. "Everything's accounted for as far as I can tell. The golden scarab you mentioned, it's been located, tucked away in a mislabeled crate. A simple error, not theft. Dr. Carter's notes were thorough, despite her lapse." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A simple error, you say? Most interesting. And the workers, they are at ease now, no?" Hensley nodded. "They were spooked, but they're back to work. No more talk of curses, thanks to you." Satisfied, Poirot moved on, his next conversation with Major Blake. The retired soldier stood alone, his flask in hand, his eyes distant. Poirot's questions were gentle but probing. "Major Blake," he said, "the case is closed, but your burden remains. Amer's questions about your past, they troubled you deeply, no? Will you share this burden with Hercule Poirot?" Blake's jaw tightened, his voice low. "You've got your killer, Poirot. Leave my past out of it." Amer was digging into things he didn't understand, old debts, bad decisions from my army days. I told him to drop it, and that's all there was to it. Poirot's smile was compassionate. "The past, it is a heavy load, Major, but you are free of this crime, and perhaps in time you will find peace." Their final stop was Lady Beatrice's tent, where she sat with a cup of tea, her hands steady for the first time in days. Her eyes, though tired, held a spark of "Can face him. Tell him we must leave this place."
Poirot's expression softened, his voice gentle.
"Madame, your courage, it has grown. You have faced your fear, and that is a victory greater than any treasure in the tomb. Sir Reginald, he will listen, if you speak with strength."
As they left her tent, Sir Reginald approached, his face a mixture of gratitude and grudging respect.
"Poirot,"
he said, his voice gruff.
"you've done what you came to do. The expedition's back on course, and my debts, well, they're my problem, but I owe you thanks."
Poirot inclined his head, his eyes sharp but kind.
"Sir Reginald, the tomb, it is your triumph. But beware the cost of ambition. The truth, it is a harsh master, but it sets us free."
With the camp settling into a new rhythm, Poirot and Hastings returned to their tent to finalize their preparations. The caravan's arrival was imminent, and the promise of Cairo's comforts loomed large. Poirot sat with his pocketbook, reviewing his notes one final time, his expression one of quiet satisfaction.
"Hastings,"
he said, closing the book with a soft snap.
"the case, it is complete. The scarab, the chisel mark, the arguments, they were all pieces of a puzzle, and now the picture is clear. Dr. Carter's crime was one of desperation, but the others, they too bore their secrets. The desert, it reveals all in time."
Hastings nodded, his relief tempered by a lingering sadness.
It's a grim business, Poirot. All this for a mistaken translation, a moment of panic.
Poirot's eyes twinkled, a rare warmth in his gaze.
"Oui, mon ami. But it is the human condition. We strive, we err, we hide. But the truth, it finds us. And Hercule Poirot, he ensures it does."
As the caravan appeared on the horizon, its camels swaying in the heat haze, the camp gathered to bid them farewell. Sir Reginald offered a stiff handshake, Lady Beatrice a tearful smile, Ridley a nervous nod, and Blake a curt salute. The tomb of Pharaoh Khemtu stood silent, its secrets now catalogued, its curse dispelled by the light of truth. Poirot, with a final glance at the desert, climbed into the caravan, his small figure a beacon of order in the chaos of the sands.
"Come, Hastings.
He said, his voice light.
The Nile awaits, and with it, the promise of a proper cup of tea."
As the caravan moved away, the desert stretched endlessly before them, its silence a testament to the mysteries it had yielded, and those it would keep forever. Chapter 15. The Departure. The desert stretched
Suit still pristine, despite the dust. His mustache, a perfect curve of waxed precision. His green eyes, reflective and calm, gazed out at the horizon, as if the desert itself held one final lesson for his little gray cells. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated beside him, adjusted his pith helmet and sighed with relief. The oppressive heat of the camp, the tangled web of lies, and the grim reality of Dr. Evelyn Carter's crime were behind them. The promise of Cairo, its bustling streets, cool hotels, and most importantly, a proper cup of tea, felt like a balm to his weary soul. Yet he could not shake the feeling that Poirot, ever the perfectionist, was still mulling over some infinitesimal detail of the case, as if the desert had not yet released its final secret. "Poirot," Hastings said, fanning himself with a folded map. "It's done, isn't it? You've solved the mystery, caught the murderer, and left the camp in better shape than we found it. Surely, even you can't find fault with that." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "Mon ami, you are correct. The case, it is solved. Dr. Carter's confession, it was the key that unlocked the truth of Amir's death, the chisel mark, the scarab, the amulet, all pieces of a puzzle that Hercule Poirot has assembled with precision. And yet, the desert, it teaches us humility. No. It reminds us that truth, like the sands, is ever shifting, ever revealing. Hastings raised an eyebrow, accustomed to Poirot's philosophical musings, but still curious. Humility. You, Poirot, I'd say you've every right to be proud. You saw through the lies, the distractions, and found the killer when no one else could. Poirot's eyes twinkled, a rare warmth softening his features. Pride, Hastings. It is a dangerous thing, as we have seen. Dr. Carter, her pride in her work, led to her downfall. Sir Reginald, his pride in his expedition blinded him to the cost. Even Major Blake and young Ridley, their secrets were born of pride. Pride in their past, their loyalty. Hercule Poirot, he seeks only the truth, and in that— Do you think the camp will recover? After all this, murder, lies, debts, it's a wonder they can go on.
Poirot's gaze drifted to the desert, his voice soft but certain. "The human spirit, mon ami, it is resilient, even in the face of tragedy. The tomb, it will yield its treasures, and Sir Reginald, he will find his glory, though at a cost. Lady Beatrice, she will find her strength. Ridley, he will grow. Even Blake, he may yet face his past. The desert, it tests us, but it also reveals who we are. Hastings nodded, his relief tinged with admiration. And Dr. Carter? What becomes of her? Poirot's expression grew somber. Dr. Carter, she will face justice as she must. Her crime, it was born of fear, of a desire to protect her name. But the truth, it cannot be buried, not even in the sands of Egypt. She will pay the price, but perhaps in time, she will find redemption. The caravan paused briefly at a small oasis, the camels drinking greedily from a shimmering pool surrounded by date palms. Poirot stepped down, his patent leather shoes gleaming improbably in the dust, and stood at the water's edge, his hands clasped behind his back. Hastings joined him, the cool shade a welcome respite from the sun. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice almost a whisper. "The desert, it is a mirror. It shows us our strengths, our weaknesses, our truths. In this case, we have seen ambition, fear, loyalty, and betrayal. But above all, we have seen justice. Hercule Poirot, he does not solve mysteries for glory, but to restore order, to bring light to the darkness." Hastings smiled, touched by his friend's rare introspection. "You've done that, Poirot. The camp is safe, the truth is known, and we're heading home. I'd say that's a job well done." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes twinkling. "Oui, Hastings. But the work of Hercule Poirot, it is never truly done. There are always mysteries, always truths to uncover. But for now, let us enjoy the journey to Cairo, where the tea, it will be hot, and the dust, it will not cling to my shoes." As the caravan resumed its journey, the tomb of Pharaoh Khemtu faded into the distance, its ancient stones silent once more. The camp, with its secrets and struggles, would continue, but Poirot's work was complete. The desert stretched endlessly around them, a vast canvas of sand and sky, its mysteries no match for the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot. The caravan moved on, carrying Poirot and Hastings toward Cairo, toward new adventures, and toward the eternal